What's going on? Welcome to Creator Factor, where we help diverse creators build communities, businesses, and brands online. I am the host that loves you the most, Ozeal, and I'm feeling good. I'm feeling great. How about you? Hope you're doing well. Today, my friend, we're going to dig into the podcasting with our special guest who embodies the spirit of business, innovation, and connection, which I'm all about. He has over 15 years, y'all, of experience in advertising, sales, and partnerships, working with podcast agencies, brands, and business owners. He is currently the head of growth partnerships and community at Castmagic, Castmagic.io, an AI platform that helps creators and creative solopreneurs repurpose content with just a few clicks. Without further ado, I'm gonna just jam. I'm excited, y'all. Creator Factor fam, let's welcome to the show none other, all the way from LA, Los Angeles, California, Greg Wasserman in the house. Greg, how you feeling?
Pleasure. Amazing. I mean, look, if you can't get pumped just listening to that and energized and like, all right, what are we going to talk about today? I'm in. Yeah, you're probably not listening to this.
We have to bring the energy, man, because you're talking
I
about my
love it.
favorite thing here, podcasting, which all of the conversations we've had so far, I've enjoyed. But I have a sweet spot. I have a sweet spot for podcasting because, as many of you may or may not know, I've been in this podcasting space for close to a decade, maybe even more than that. So, Greg, whenever we connected, I was like, okay, let's jam. You obviously have a background, everything you're doing with Castmagic. We're going to talk a little bit about AI, but of course, your thoughts on podcasting and more. But LA, man, you're in LA. Let's talk. What's your favorite thing about LA?
The fact that it's geographically desirable from a weather standpoint and that it's geographically desirable to get to most places I may want to. So with a 6-hour drive, um, maximum, I can be in San Francisco, I can be in Vegas, I can be in Phoenix, like I can go down to San Diego in 2 hours. I can go to wine country. Like there's just so many weekend getaways. I'm born and raised in Chicago. So it's like, all right, 6 hours to go from Chicago to someplace. Like, do I really want to go there? Like here are 2 hours. Let's go to wine country for the weekend, let's go to the ocean for the day. Like let's go down to San Diego and watch the Padres play. Like there's just so many great things that accessibility
Yeah.
keeps me spending more money, right?
Also very expensive. All right,
Yes.
what's what on the flip side? What's the worst thing? And it can't be traffic. What's the worst thing you hate about
Cost of
LA?
living and the
Yeah.
education. So growing up in
Mm.
Chicago, like I grew up going to public school. So like that was amazing. It was top schools in the country. It was incredible. Here, most kids are going to private school, which I don't understand how you afford that in the first place because the education system is not the same. So yeah, that's if you got kids, which I don't, those are things to think about: cost of living and education.
To switch gears on what you're doing now, and before we kind of get started, I always like to hear the creator origin story. You know, where it all began for Greg Wasserman. You know, where did it begin for you? Because you have an array of experience in different, as I mentioned, sales, advertising, podcasting. Now doing the work that you're doing with Cast Magic, but where did your creative bug come from?
So, I mean, I remember I went to college, took a marketing class, loved it. I'm like, I'm not a creative person. Like, if you think about it from a artist standpoint, like I have creativity in me, but I'm not like the wow, I thought of this kind of moment. But I loved what marketing offered. I'm like, this is incredible. I looked at brands and I thought, like, how is this company doing that? And like, this is interesting on how someone's thinking about marketing a product. And so I fell in love with marketing, which then took me on a career of media sales and working with advertising agencies, going like, all right, well, I wanted to work for agencies, New York, Chicago, LA, your top 3 markets for advertising.
Oh,
Being an undergrad, I'm like, well, I didn't have a car. So back to your comment about traffic, like I didn't have a car. So living in LA, I'm like,
that wasn't a
this
factor.
isn't the greatest experience.
Yeah.
But Chicago is a better market from advertising. I'm like, great, let me go back home and work in the ad market. It just didn't happen. It's just not the way the cards fell, and that's not how the universe worked. So I ended up in the sales side of advertising, working at Yahoo. So now you're working with small businesses and brands and agencies and figuring out, like, how do I take what they're trying to sell and offer, our solution of whatever the product was. Fast forward a number of years, if we look at it from a podcast standpoint. So I'll pause your question, but go to the podcasting piece. Like I worked at CBS, now Odyssey. So I sold podcast ads there. And that's where I got to dive into, in a sense, influencer marketing. If you think about it from radio and what podcasters are doing, from like, hey, here's my promo code, or here's what I'm offering, here's my host read ads and so forth. Like that was really cool. But then the department I was also in, we built the branded content arm for, at the time, CBS Radio. So it was a matter of like, how do we go find talent? One of the projects I worked on was with the city of Seattle. And we took the concept of The Amazing Race, which is a CBS show, and we made it the Emerald Race. So I had to go source former contestants from The Amazing Race. We wrote a script. We wrote an entire 3-day, imagine you are in The Amazing Race, but in the city of Seattle. And there's this incredible experience of seeing how that all came together. Took that and continued on in branded content before I ended up really diving into the podcast space.
It's interesting, because you've been in the space, you went through formal training in marketing, and then you started working with different corporations with branded content. I feel like you got kind of early on with the content marketing side of the big, corporate companies. I'm curious to know your thoughts on the merger, because podcasting has been around for a minute now, but now we're seeing this evolution of mainstream media, radio, embracing podcasting even more and adopting it as a legit form of content marketing, including advertising, which we're going to talk about. Curious to know your thoughts on your thoughts on the merging of the two, of seeing mainstream, the advertising world embracing podcasting as a legit platform. What's been your observation on that?
I guess this goes to I guess my brand platform as a whole. Stop treating it as just a podcast and start treating it as a brand. And what I mean by that is, if we continue to think of podcasting as just a download medium, and therefore I'm only looking at shows based on the number of downloads, and you continue to just buy based on that as either a sponsorship or CPM basis, cost per thousand, you are doing a major disservice to the brand and the business itself. You are treating it as a standalone item. And so if we look at it from a creator standpoint, right? Like a creator could, that's what I love about our platform. Like I could go ahead and take that podcast, then repurpose that in video clips. I can take that as a blog, take it as a newsletter, take it in all these other assets. But the advertisers, like, I just want to buy, I will buy your newsletter, or I will buy your Instagram, or I will buy the podcast downloads. You're not looking at it's like, no, I'm the brand. Therefore, this is what I'm bringing to the table across my entire platform. So right now, we're so focused on standalone mediums. Like I'm just buying this. When I was doing branded content, right, we were looking at it as you were buying the content we're creating, but also the distribution and the organic components to it. So you looked at it as a holistic piece of your brand. If you're thinking about podcasting, most podcastings is just a matter of how many downloads do you have, and I'm just buying it on that. And that becomes what I believe a disservice to the podcast industry.
Interesting insight. Yeah, because one of the most common challenges, Greg, for indie podcasters, for creators, as you may already know, is the marketing side. We think that we record a piece of content or video, we publish it to the world, we'll share it 1 or 2 times on social media, and then we let it, and then it's it, done, on to the next, without really looking at it as a brand, as you call it, which I love that perspective of not treating your podcast as just a podcast, but it's a brand. And that ultimately attracts advertisers, and correct me if I'm wrong here, advertisers, when they see brands, podcast brands, let's just say podcast brands, that are equipped with not only just the content itself, but actually have a strategy to distribute content. That's a lot more attractive to an advertiser, knowing that this is a podcast brand that's going to give us major distribution on all channels outside of download. It's important, but not as, because we really like how they're marketing the content, versus just saying, hey, advertiser, we're podcasting, we had this number, and then this is it, right? Trading that time.
And unfortunately, just based on, I mean, I got burnt out in the media sales realm. But unfortunately, the way it is bought and the way it is sold, um, what is your downloads? And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
if you are an indie podcaster, stop thinking about how do I go ahead and get a CPM? How can I go get a sponsor for my show? Think of it, how can I get a sponsor for my brand? And my brand
Mm.
is then all those other components. So do you want me and all that I bring, or do you want just the listeners to my show and you're missing out on all the other components that I'm bringing to the table?
Love that. Let's talk about ad buys, because I've
Yeah.
had mixed feelings and just through experience with doing ad buys for clients and even for myself experimenting with that. What are your thoughts, man, on a podcaster who wants to use ad buys to get more exposure? Because I've seen it that it's less about conversions and more of a vanity metric. I would like to just share your thoughts on kind of the effectiveness of actually running ads for your podcast as an indie creator. What are your thoughts on
When
that?
you say running ads, I'm spending money to promote my show, or
Correct.
okay.
For podcasters who want to, yeah, get more exposure.
Um, so if we go back into the career path I had, so my last role was running 3 podcast listening platforms.
Right.
That is truly the core of how I got into the passion of podcasting. Like selling the podcast ads for CBS, it was great. I loved what I was doing there. But then when you're running a podcast listening platform, you have a unique perspective. My perspective was I had to work with all the hosting companies and go, look, your show is hosted with X company. Well, we need to make sure that that show is on our listening platform, not just Apple and Spotify, but all the other platforms out there, because we've got millions of users. And so podcasters then always had the same 3 questions. How do I grow my audience? How do I get distribution? And how do I
Mhm.
monetize? Right. And you shake your head because you're like, yeah, those are pretty
It's
much
all-
the same questions. Yeah.
yeah.
And so the thing was like, hold on, you want more distribution, but you're only focused on Apple and Spotify. If you think
Mhm.
about 30% of the market is, I guess, these secondary brands like that I was running that people aren't familiar with, but there's millions of people that are. And if you actually took the action to go, I'm downloading something besides Apple and Spotify, most likely you listen to podcasts more. You probably have specific features about the app that you're using, hence why you're using that specific app. So if you want to get more distribution, but you're not reaching those 30%, like that's free. That's free listeners. Why aren't you doing that? So one of the other pieces that we ran was, how do I help you inside our app promote your show to
Mhm.
an audience of listeners? So one of the products I sold was, you want to engage with a podcast listening audience and promote your show directly to them. And where all they had to do is
Right.
click a button and start listening. It worked incredibly effective, 40 to 80% retention after a 2-week period. And you're
Wow.
just able to get new subscribers and get people listening because they're curious. They're like, I'm in an app where I want to learn about things. Then to spend money. So that's the first part of your question. Like, I think there's value in doing something like that. There's also a great value to that because, in a sense, you can kind of gain the system of the apps. So as you are building your subscriber count within that app, while you're paying for it and the retention's there, it's changing the algorithm for the organic side of that app, going like, oh, this show's now trending. So then you'll find yourself showing up in the trending section for that app because you're growing, you're increasing. So your paid fuels your organic component to it. At the end of the day, you need good content. So that's where the
Right.
retention piece comes in. But there's so many apps that allow you to do that. Doing a paid, let me go ahead and do a 30-second ad in someone else's show. I've heard they've worked. I've heard they've also. If I look at it from my personal use case, it doesn't work because I am listening to a show and I'm like, hold on, now I've got to stop and remember this, write it down, or I'm going to pause what I'm listening to go find what you just recommended to me. My brain doesn't work that way. So I know that there's stats out there that say like it's good. For me personally, I think that's not the greatest thing. I think you should focus more on swaps as opposed to paid ads with Inside, because the swaps then creates a relationship. as opposed to paid ads. I'm going to buy something in you. That's not a relationship. That's more transactional.
So just for our listeners who can you break down what a promo swap is, Greg?
Yeah. So let's say let's say I have a show and I'd be like, all right, dude, like your listener, my listener, like there probably is an overlap. We've got some good content. Like I think my people would like your show. Your show would like your people would like my show. You mind talking about it? And I'll talk about your show and we'll let our listeners know like, hey, here's another show that I think you should listen to. There's no money exchanged. It was like we got to meet each other. We're having this conversation no different than we are right now. And then we get to talk about each other's show and go from there.
So what I'm hearing is collaborating with other creators, which I always say the podcasting space world specifically is one of the most collaborative communities. Is reaching out saying, hey, can we do a 30-second promo swap where you introduce either the host read ad, and then the benefit is that you're getting in front of an audience that is either perfectly aligned with your brand as well, like in this space, creator with another creator podcast, or even adjacent podcasts, right, Greg, where you can actually also kind of overlap and get in front of different audiences. That's a lot more tactical because we're getting in front of podcast listeners as versus what you said, podcast ads, where you're just building brand awareness, but you're not really converting them into listeners. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, completely.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, the fun part about running those platforms was, I guess consumers are lazy. We know this.
Yeah.
Consumers are lazy. And so podcasters would rather spend money
Mm,
to get more engagement than do the free organic things. And so I guess when you've got resource constraints, time and money, people would rather spend the money than spend the time of getting stuff that would normally set them up for success. And the things to set them up for success is like, I want more distribution. Great. Go make sure your show is distributed all the places. You want to grow your audience? Well, do you even have a website? Do you even have social? Do you even have all these components that will help you engage with your audience? Or you're like, hey, listen to my show, and you're sending everyone to your host platform, which is not yours. You're like, I'm sending people to Libsyn, Buzzsprout, Captivate's
right.
built-in website as opposed to my own. And so if I switch hosting company, well, where's that audience now going? I've got redirects. Like, you've got to do the organic free things, and it spends a little time. But once you set that up, then the paid's going to work so much better for you, and it's going to build your brand so much more.
Working with bigger podcasts, Greg, like what are some of the things that you see? And one indie creator can say, hey, well, these are big podcasts that have a large team. They have resources that we don't. But for our audience, which are solopreneurs, solo creators, what can we do what are some of the common mistakes that you see that indie creators make, that you see the big ones where we can adopt and embrace some of the strategies and tactics they do and bring it into our world?
Great. Goes back to the core here. Treat yourself as a brand.
Yeah.
So if you're a hobbyist, then you're timid. You're like, I'm not going to do this. This isn't my data job. Like I want to make this a thing, but I've got this other thing. Those creators that are like, no, I'm investing. I realize this is an investment in my future. They're actually taking the steps to do it. So if you believe in yourself as a creator, if you believe yourself is what you are doing, then you will invest in it better. You will learn your craft. You will practice. You'll invest in right tools. It doesn't mean that I have to go get the best mic right away. Like first, start off simple, but invest in it. Know that you're making these investments. So those that you say are large, they got large because they invested. They treated it like a business. They're like, I know that if I invest in this, in 3 years, this is where I'm going to be, as opposed to I'm kind of doing this, I'm trying to figure this out. And then 3 years after doing this, I'm like, why am I not there? Because you never actually invested in it. You never actually took the time to do things organic. You didn't take away from the creator standpoint. We as humans should always be investing in ourselves. You can't take away my education. So if I'm going to skill up, then let me go ahead and pay for that skill up because I know that's going to help me in whatever I'm doing. So are you as a creator doing that? Are you investing in yourself in the business, or you're just like, I'm just trying to do this and hope that it works?
I interviewed a pretty well-known established YouTuber a few years ago at a conference, and um, we were on the side, we were doing a podcast interview, and I asked him, I said, what was the thing that changed your YouTube channel? And that's exactly what he said, Greg. He says, I stopped treating it as a hobby and I started treating this as a business. He goes, if I were to go back, I would have treated this as a business. He said, every video would have been an employee. Everybody's moving together in the back end, and I would have already started trying to monitor, or at least have a monetizing strategy from the jump, and figure out how are these videos going to position. Now he said he balanced it with fun content and also content that was very curated and that was going to be positioning his brand as an authority leader in that space. But yeah, that was his thing, man. He said it was basically that mindset switch from hobbyist to professional that really changed the game for him. So I'm glad that you mentioned the importance of investing in yourself. And I agree. You and I talked about this, like, personal development is so embedded in what we do as solo creators, because if we don't have the proper mindset and we're not able to switch from the hobby to the professional creator, it's just going to be tough. And then next thing you know, you quit and you're going to pot fade and you're going to blame the industry, you're going to blame the content, you can blame everybody. But in actuality, it's because creators failed to invest in themselves. And I think that is the underlying X factor.
I would also add to hearing you talk, I think of investing in processes. So one thing I keep telling podcasters is start labeling your stuff. Like, take it as a YouTube, start labeling all this content you have, because once it's 3 years later, how do you repurpose that content? You're like, oh, I've got to go back and listen to it. I don't remember what it is. So if you start early, creating a system of like, what was this show about? What was this content about? What was this video about? And you can start tagging things. That then also allows you to, especially using a tool like Castmagic, repurpose it, bring it all together, create more. And then you're like, oh, if you listen to this episode, then maybe you'll like these other 5 episodes. Well, how do you know which other 5 episodes to recommend if you're not tagging them appropriately? So once again, if you're treating yourself as a business and you're understanding long-term, this is where I want to go, start small, but also get those systems in place. It's overwhelming to get those systems in place, but once you get them going, it becomes easier. And it's just like everything. It's consistency. It's flexing a muscle. It's learning how to do it.
Speaking of investing in yourself, let's talk about a tool that you know a thing or two about. Castmagic. You've been at the forefront of this integrating AI tool, which is perfect for podcasters and content creators. Curious to know your thoughts, man. How do you see AI transforming the podcasting landscape moving forward, especially in terms of the content creation and even with the audience growth and engagement?
So let's go back to your previous question about what should solopreneurs and solo creators, how do they compete with the big guys? Well, content repurposing, if we look at Gary Vee is the OG of content repurposing. Yes, he has a team, but like, he is spending a day filming content, he's structuring this, and he's figuring out, all right, let's disseminate it. So he's investing in 1 day of content creation so that it fuels all my other channels and so forth. He's thinking strategically about those pieces. So you're able to use a tool like Castmagic. So back to your question, AI, how is it changing things? It's now letting any creator be a media agency. If I think about that way, I can take a video and have that repurposed into all the different components. So now, if you invest in yourself, if you treat yourself as a business, you're thinking, how do I get my product in the hands of everyone out there? How do I get it and reach the consumer where the consumer wants it, not where I want them to consume my product? So you can go, I have a YouTube video and I only want you to go to my YouTube video because that is what I want. But like, I may never watch your YouTube video. But if you cut that into little shorts and you put it in as an Instagram reel and I follow you on Instagram, then great, I'm getting these little bite-sized pieces. You don't have to focus me on trying to watch what I'm never going to watch because I'm not a YouTube watcher and I don't have the time for that, but sitting on my phone, I can do that. Podcast, like, great. I may not listen to your podcast, but I can follow you on a newsletter. There's a podcaster I follow, never listen to his show, but I look forward to his Thursday email every week because the content that's in there is part of it's repurposed from his actual podcast. Part of it's just amazing. And he's got his podcast at the bottom. So I'm learning about who he's always talking about. So when you start thinking about those things, you become a media company and you allow yourself to repurpose content. AI is allowing now everyone who wants to take content, whether it's back catalog, whether it's your thinking thoughts. Like, I use our mobile app. I will speak a minute about my thoughts. Like, maybe this conversation, I'm like, oh, I had a good idea. And I'll turn that into a LinkedIn post for me. And now I'm able to engage with people in a completely different way. So not a content creator, because like I'm not, but in reality I am, because I am posting every day consistently on LinkedIn. And where's my content come from? Is either from being a guest on someone's show. It's being the thoughts that come to my mind, which I repurpose from a tool like Castmagic. So you have no excuse now not to be everywhere. And if you say it's overwhelming because like, how do I do this? That's why the tool's there. That's literally what the AI is for. It's like, you just have to post it. It's done it for you.
Yeah, I think I was laughing because you're right. Whenever you mentioned Gary Vaynerchuk, and as many of you know, he's the big social media guru himself, who's very big on posting on all platforms and just a beast when it comes to his content creation and his marketing output. And creators would always have this conversation and say, hey, it's great for Gary Vee because he has a whole team. And sure, that's true. As you mentioned, that's valid. But there's no excuses now, because now with AI tools like Castmagic, we can compete if we really wanted to. It's just all about setting the systems and processes, compete. As you said, when you showed me how you could just kind of dictate on your phone and turn that into a piece of content, which I'm a huge fan of, because I'm always walking. When you showed me, Greg, I was like, what? Because I walk and I'm always coming up with different ideas when I go on my evening walk. And I'm like, you mean to tell me that I can just speak into my phone and that can turn into a LinkedIn post or part of a newsletter, etc. So for my creators out there who are resisting AI, just know that it's not there to replace your voice. I say this all the time, y'all. I say this is here to assist you, to make you more efficient, more effective when it comes to not only your content creation, but your marketing. So I'm glad that you mentioned that, Greg. No excuses, y'all. No excuses.
So let's go. That you bring up a great point, like a tool like Castmagic and AI. So there's AI components out there that you like. It doesn't sound like me. It's not me. And then
Right.
you've got a tool. Whole focus of Castmagic is it takes only your recording. I only know your words, your content, and therefore the content that's coming out. While it sounds AI because it may not be written like you, it's still your words, and you can fine tune it. And there's ways within the platforms to fine tune that. But like, we only know what you've said. I only can take this conversation. If we took this conversation and put in Castmagic, it doesn't know outside stuff. It's just going to may not get my inflection, may not get the excitement of what both of us bring to the conversation, but like, it is our words, and then we just have to spice it up and edit it a little bit. But if I can take this conversation and turn this into 20 pieces of content in 3 minutes, and then all I now have to do, instead of figuring out how do I draft 20 pieces, but I just become an editor and edit 20 pieces, like, yeah, that's exactly how you can compete with someone like Gary Vee and go like, great, one conversation recorded for half an hour or a 30-second thought. Now I got all the content I need.
Give us a breakdown of Castmagic. And again, I'll make sure that I link it up in the show notes for you guys to check it out. But Castmagic repurposes content, but just give us a full kind of like a full landscape of what Castmagic does. I know there's newsletters. Go ahead and kind of break it down for us, Greg.
So it originally started in the podcast community. The founders have a podcast and like, I don't have the time. Like, this is literally it. I don't have the time to do all the things that you need to do for a podcast. So they built Castmagic to sell that, right? Social proof in that regards.
Yeah. Yeah.
But because of that, and what I love is they're not just podcasters, right? They were running a company. They were doing meetings. They were having coaching calls. They were doing all these other pieces. So with Inside Castmagic, we will look at how do we become the content repurposing engine for anything that you're doing, audio and video.
Mhm.
So back to their whole piece, like, how do I take a voice memo? How do I take a YouTube file? How do I take a speaking panel that I've been on and go, great, I would love to take me in a stage and repurpose that. How do I take an Instagram reel and now figure out how do I take that, repurpose that into a LinkedIn post, or maybe I take three Instagram reels and go, ooh, if I stitch these three together, write me a script that combine these three, and then I can go record a new piece of content, literally from the original three pieces of content. So it is looking at all these different ways that you can repurpose content. Majority of it is text-based, but there is the ability to clip and download specific clips of video or audio that you may want. But yeah, the sky's the limit of what do you want to extract. So I've got coaches that use it for their one-on-one coaching calls, and then it creates a worksheet and going like, all right,
Mm.
client, here's a worksheet for you. I've got course creators.
Yeah.
One of my favorite aspects of it is I take a podcast, I load it in there, I use the prompt course creation. So I literally take every podcast, turn it into a course. Like technically, we're doing a masterclass right now. Like imagine you could take this conversation, go, great, I'm going to teach a course on this. Castmagic will create that course for you. You then go build it in PowerPoint or whatever you need, then deliver that course into wherever you want, then bring that recording into Castmagic. It'll create a worksheet. It will create the quiz. We'll create a lead magnet so you can sell that workshop. So you've got all these components that you can repurpose whatever audio video you want. It's amazing.
It's crazy. Yeah, whenever you showed me, I was like, "Oh my!" And I want to make sure that we'll get Greg back because we're gonna have a tutorial and a breakdown of how this works. My mind was blown. I played with AI, but I haven't dug into Castmagic, which I'm excited about. But when you showed me some of the things you can do, listen, y'all, Creator Factor fam, I'm telling you, it's gonna just change the way you think about content creation. I think it alleviates the stress and gives you mad relief about just putting it out there. There's no excuses. This thing could do everything with a little bit, of course, of your personal touch and your style
Yes.
flair. Of course. Because everybody's like, Greg, when I talk about AI, and I get it, I've noticed even people online now, creators that I follow, the pros don't do it, but you could tell from the amateur, they just copy and paste. And I know it, they're using the same verbiage. And now we're seeing a lot of the same old content. And you can tell it's easily AI generated. And then you have people that use it, but they add their own flair. And I think there's a bit of frustration now with saying, well, it's not, embracing the authentic voice. As you said, it captures your authentic voice, but creators out there, I mean, for the indie ones, don't get lazy. Like, make sure that you take time to edit and add your voice to it, because I think it's a powerful tool, especially when you can add your own voice and your own flair to it. We need
I
that.
think I think if we look at where AI is going, back to the question of how
Yeah,
AI is changing, but also the audience here of creators, like
yeah.
your voice is the only thing that's not replicable. I know
Mm,
AI can like copy, but like who you are is you are going back to you are the brand. So your podcast is not the brand. You are the
that's it.
brand. People tune
That's it.
in for you. Your YouTube channel is they turn into you. Mr. Beast, why is he? People tune in for him. And so if you can start thinking about that, therefore a tool like Castmagic is taking your voice and it is your words, it is authentic to you, as opposed to if I just went to ChatGPT and asked it to write me things, it's not there, which also becomes the SEO component. So if we think about marketing organic, AI is writing your words in a structure that would not be able to. Like if you asked me to write a LinkedIn post, it's going to take me a little longer. But if I just spoke and it knows the structure of what I want my LinkedIn post, my words structured there, that's not going to go against me from an SEO. It's not going to go like, oh, this is too AI written. It's like, no, it's my words. So you can't replace my words. You can't replace me, which only helps in the long run from a SEO standpoint.
Greg, you went through the formal marketing training, and you worked with big companies like CBS, and now working with creators. And I'm curious to know, like, what have you discovered about the creator community that's like excites you the most? Like, what is it about working from corporate with creators that you're like, man, this is really exciting. I'm excited to be a part of this with Cast Magic and all the things that you do.
there's a lot of red tape at the corporate side of things. So if we look at corporate using influencers going like, all right, if I think about the branded content, like there's a structure, there's a format, there's I needed to say this. So if I go to with a
Yeah.
creator and an influencer going like, all right, brand X wants you to post and build this content, but we have certain restrictions and there's always like your hands are tied. So you're like, I had to like do this camera angle of the car, I had to do this, or like sometimes they're like, no, go freely do what you want to do. So that would be a great case, but it's not
Yeah.
always the case. So for creators, you have the freedom, like you have the creative freedom to do what you
Yeah.
want. If a brand's coming to you, they're coming to you for a reason because they realize like we love your style, we love your audience, but we're still gonna want you to talk about us the way we want you to talk about us. But that's what I love about the creators. Like you have the freedom to compete, you have the ability
Yeah.
to be creative. The sky's the limit. You are your own restrictions. If you want to invest a lot of money to build this whole set and do it, or you want to do it on the cheap, like it's up to you.
I love it. I love it, man. As we land the plane, brother, like this has been amazing, and we're gonna talk some more about AI and podcasting, and we're gonna be working together very soon. So, Creator Factor fam, make sure you stay tuned in because we're gonna be working together with Greg on a special project for our creators out there. Greg, if there's one creator factor that every creator should learn and or master, what would that be?
Hmm. Believe in yourself, invest in yourself, and do it early, and know that 1% gain every day of improvement at the end of the year is 38 times better than you were from day one. So if you just do small little things, it's getting over the overwhelming fear of, oh, I've got to be perfect. Just slight improvements. Keep honing that craft. Start doing it. You're going to be the big time pretty soon because you've done that.
Castmagic.io. Ladies and gents, Greg Wasserman. We're going to make sure that we link up all his LinkedIn profiles where you can find him on social media. He's very active on LinkedIn. And Greg, I love your content because you're definitely a creator, brother, because I love the content that you talk about. It's not just about entrepreneurship and creator, but it's about mental health and different things that you introduce as well. So big fan of your LinkedIn post, my man. And so glad that we were able to connect and have you on the Creator Factor show and giving us a lot to think about beyond podcasting. Yes, we're podcasters, we're creators, but we're brands. Making that mind switch, engaging like brands, operating like brands, building community like the big brands out there could definitely shift the things that we're doing as content creators. So thank you for that, that wisdom, and thank you for providing that value for our community, man. Much love, and we appreciate that, brother.
Hey, it was a pleasure. Hopefully you all enjoyed listening and find me on LinkedIn. That's where I live.
All right. Peace.